Long time no see. So I've decided that I'm just gonna kind of start recording videos and uploading whether I like it or not, but not in a negative way where it's gonna be forced. It's more just, instead of trying to feel like I need to have some good idea for a video every single time I upload, just gonna upload, period. It's not that that's a big issue. I mean, that's sort of how I handled stuff in the past, but kind of just tired of overthinking everything, you know? I've always wanted to, of course, grow more, and views and stuff start to really matter to you, and you just start really stressing over those numbers. But at this point, screw it, man. I've already taken more or less like 2 full months off from YouTube. My channel has hit like an all-time low. Can't go much worse from here. So let's just get back into the swing of things and actually try to enjoy what we're doing. Now, current times, I, of course, don't have an idea for this video. We're just kind of rolling with it. But I do want to talk about some stuff, which I find pretty interesting. I gotta say, I'm pretty lucky. So I've always mained the G36, not always, but you know, for a decent while, I've ended up maining the G36. It was a solid gun. It's accurate. It always sounded decent, which was a plus. But it's accurate, had decent damage, and you know, overall, the G36 was about as solid of a gun you could get for basically years. Like, the gun hasn't gotten bad in any time. This is rough. No, the gun hasn't really ever gotten bad. There was a point where they started nerfing it and messing with the stats a little bit that it did become a lot less fun to use. But by no means was that anything terrible. I've got to say, man, I'm really lucky. You take other guns, and the prime example that I like to use for this kind of conversation is the M16A4. The M16A4 at one point was literally, no questions asked, the best gun in the game if you could use it properly or if you macroed it. When you use a burst gun in Phantom Forces for, you know, prior to the M16A4 nerf and everything, there was something called hyper bursting, where if you bursted perfectly, you would have like perfect aim. Like, there was no recoil to it. Now, I don't know why the guns did that, where if you burst it correctly, the recoil stats just basically disappeared, but it was extremely overpowered. So of course, a lot of people ended up maining the M16A4 and becoming insanely good with it. Why wouldn't you, right? It's the best gun in the game. It wasn't crazy hard to learn how to burst properly. I personally never really liked burst, so I didn't use it all that much. I would occasionally use like a macro for it in pub matches and stuff just for the fun of it, but never really got around to actually learning how to really use the gun, which, do I regret that? Kind of, because it was just insane. It was, you know, like I said, no argument the absolute best gun, and kind of missed out on that. But back to what I was saying, the G36, I got lucky on. The G36 has been consistently good throughout all my time playing. Even before when I started to use the gun, back in 2016 when I had first started playing the game, G36 was good. Today's time, 2022, G36 is still pretty dang good. Happy about that. I've never had to really, which, don't get me wrong, I personally think that maining a gun is not the best way to go about things. You become a little too reliant on it. And of course that can be argued, you know, each way. For the most part, there was a lot of people you would see throughout time, especially in like the competitive scene, where if they weren't using a certain gun, they just weren't that good outside of that. And you could probably say that I was sort of one of those people. Now, I had other guns that I could use. I was good with an Asval, I was good with an AK, I was good with most other things, Scar Hammer, things like that. But of course, when I had a G36, it was a different level of play. And take that for anyone. When you main a gun, you have 100,000 kills on it. Of course, that's going to be the gun that you're most comfortable with. You can control the recoil without ever thinking about it. You have all the benefits of creating a natural kind of rhythm to things. To be lucky enough to have picked a gun many years ago that just never really got changed hard enough for me to care, solid pick. Now, I obviously don't think that the G36 should have stayed as good as it was for as long as it was. It was eventually nerfed to sort of the G36 we have now. Not as good as it once was, but still not a bad pick by literally any means. There's no way you could argue that the G36 has ever been a bad gun, but it probably should have happened a little bit sooner. The nerfs that did happen probably could have happened a bit sooner, and I don't think many of us would have complained. It would have been probably for the better. I feel like the G36 really dominated the meta for a long time. It's also a weird point, which I'm not making this a complaint video at all. I feel like I'm kind of done doing those because at this point I'm just fed up with a lot of things, but it definitely comes to a point with, especially Phantom Forces, with how many guns we have, it's hard to cycle around a meta. It's hard to make changes that not only would make sense, but also actually change the game's balance in any real meaningful way. Now, there are things that get buffed and nerfed here and there, and some of them are okay, and some of them, of course, you know, a little overkill. I don't know where I sit on this topic, if I would have preferred other guns to be cycled in and out of the meta, but I feel like that just creates the same problem over and over again, which is why games that, you know, like Call of Duty benefit from having a new game like every 2 years, 3 years, because they don't really have to worry about that as much. They could tweak a gun a little bit here or there, and of course Call of Duty is still, oh my god, they are absolutely still a problem with overpowered guns. Without a doubt, especially now that they start releasing more and more guns into a game. I think that's become a big issue with games, truthfully. Now, of course, Phantom Forces is its own unique case because they're not making a new game every few years. I think it's just become an issue as a whole that adding new guns to a game can just become wonky, and it's hard to balance those things. You take things like Call of Duty now that has like the battle passes. I feel like every battle pass while I was playing Call of Duty had some sort of an overpowered gun that desperately needed a nerf that would take a long time. And while that's not, you know, the worst thing to ever happen, it really does just kill it for a while for most people, or at least for me. Like when you join a game, if there's just one gun that just can't be beaten, and it's like, all right, well, you know, what do I do at that point? You either have to use it, and if you don't like using the gun, then you kind of get screwed over. So thankful nonetheless that the gun that I've picked has stayed consistently good. I've never had to really change it up that much, and it's been a pretty solid benefit for me. I like that I can still log in today, pick up the gun that I've always loved using, and not have an issue with it at all. I don't have to conform to the meta too much with things. Now, of course, there definitely is other guns out there that are better, and that'll always be a thing, that there will always be a meta to the game. There will always be a select set of guns that are just the best to use, and that's okay. But thankful nonetheless. Even something like the AKM, which was I was originally going to be using while talking about this, the AKM has consistently always been good as well, which I'll give you guys a fun story about my first experience with the AKM, my first like real experience with it. Back when I first joined competitive, this is going back to 2016 now, I was around like rank 42. You had to be about rank 50 to play, so I still had to rank up before I could even play in a match. I had started getting used to the competitive things. I was playing in scrims, you know, starting to get better at the game. There was a guy named Elite Bob who was the owner of Phantom Rangers, and he was considered a really top tier player at the time. And his favorite gun, to my understanding, still to this day, was the AKM. Can I blame him? Absolutely not. Back then, I didn't know much about guns at all. Didn't know anything about the meta, and I was also too low of a level to have any of those guns. And this was also before when private servers didn't give you everything for free. So I literally had to just use what I knew, which at the time, the Scar L was conveniently my pick. The Scar L back then, though, was not the Scar L that you guys know today. Not even close. The Scar L was not that good back then. And so you can imagine how a Scar L went against an AKM. I got absolutely mopped. He literally embarrassed me in the 1v1. Granted, we also did the 1v1 on Crane Site Revamp, which, if you guys don't know, the spawn trap on that map is just literally unfair. But nonetheless, he worked me with that AKM. And this was back when the AKM had more recoil than it does now, which truthfully, I wouldn't even complain if the AKM's recoil got nerfed a little bit. But it was just insane. Like, it was the first time since I had like started playing the game where I realized that guns matter so much more than I initially thought. I'm always under the impression, for the most part, that most guns can be used and you can still do all right with them. But there has been shining examples throughout the years where that just isn't the case, where certain guns are just flat out better. No arguments. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Some guns are simply better. You know, the M16A4 with macro, just insane. There was basically no way to beat it. AKM, for a long time, was considered a top tier gun for obvious reasons. High power, not that much recoil, you know, a decent reload time. There wasn't really any downsides to using the gun. And to see certain guns that have held that power throughout the years, both a good and bad thing in my eyes, of course, like I've said, but it's just been interesting. And that's another reason why I always am waiting for the next Stylus Studios game, and I'm hoping that it doesn't sort of end up like Phantom Forces. I would honestly, truthfully, rather them try to make, well, okay, so here's another issue to kind of piggyback off of that. I would like for them to make a new game every 2-3 years so it stays fresh. But coming up with A, a new concept, B, taking the developer time, and C, meeting their own expectations just wouldn't allow for it, unfortunately. The developers at Stylus are just absolutely amazing at what they do. Now, I know there's a ton of issues with PF over the years, but that's because the game was also written many years ago, and of course can't be updated all the time to a perfect level to match what Roblox has changed. A lot of these issues comes from Roblox updates that they unfortunately just can't compensate for, and that's okay. But at the end of the day, I would love for them to have new games just so we didn't have this, 6 years of using similar guns and kind of meeting that same fate as like a Call of Duty Battle Pass where a new gun comes out and it's either really good or just not cared about. And that's, unfortunately the cycle that we're in, and there's nothing we can really do about that. Happy for my own personal gain that my gun of choice just happened to stay good. I am not so happy for the people who may have picked guns and they ended up just getting nerfed into the ground, which, not that the M16A4 was nerfed into the ground, but I'm sure you get what I mean. It is a shell of what it used to be, and definitely for good reason. Like, that wasn't a bad update. Please keep the update that way. Nobody wants Hyperburst back. Well, I'm sure the M16A4 mains do, but anyone else who wants to enjoy the game does not want to deal with Hyperburst again. But yeah, that's basically my my topic for the day. I don't know if I've got much more else to say, but I also do know that I do want to finish out this game because we're dropping a easy, quick 100 kills. Might as well at least have a solid gameplay over me talking nonstop. I feel kind of bad for these dudes. I've been running a mean spawn trap for most of this game. That guy's up there. I'm probably dead. Yeah, that was a bad play. I should have honestly just gone up the ladder. But 100 kills, still 2.5 minutes left. I mean, there's technically potential for like 120, 130 if we're really lucky, but I don't probably see that happening. I would assume the game's going to end maybe right before I hit that mark. There's a guy literally like right here. Is he on top of me? Or is he dead? Oh, he's behind me. I understand. All right, we'll just wrap the game up. I don't care about the extra 10 kills or so. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.